Want to have a look at some examples of government failure. These are only some examples of how government fails. Other examples could be asymmetric information. You need to look in your notes for those. First thing, merit's good. Merit goods are items which are underprovided in the market mechanism. Okay, so these could be things like education and healthcare. If facts of production, if consumers had to actually pay for education and healthcare, they would not consume sufficient of it for the amount that we require in society. This is because maybe parents might decide that their children should go out to work rather than go to school. So because of that, the government steps in to provide this good because they feels that it benefits us as a society to have maybe a well-educated society or a healthy society. The next one we're going to look at is demerit goods. So a demerit good is one which is over-provided in the market mechanism. These are things like alcohol and cigarettes. Now, because of the fact they can be produced very, very cheaply, if left to the market to allocate them as resources, their prices may be very, very low, which would encourage people to use them. But clearly we don't want bottles of vodka to be sold at £4 a bottle or cigarettes to be sold at 50p a packet, because people would smoke more or people would drink more, which would create negative externalities, create problems for our society. So therefore the government steps in to ensure that they're not over-provided. It steps in to put a tax on the goods to stop us from buying it. And in this way, with merit goods, the government steps in to place subsidies, if required, on them to ensure that we buy them. So a subsidy and a tax. Okay. The next item we're going to have a look at is public goods. Now, a public good is a type of good that we're not concerned about whether too much or too little of the good is being provided, but whether the good will be provided at all. A public good may be defined by two key characteristics, that it is non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Okay. Non-excludability or non-excludable. This means the benefits derived from the provision of a pure public good cannot be confined to those who have actually paid for it. In this sense, those who do not pay can enjoy the benefits of consumption at no financial costs. This creates a problem of a free rider. So let's look at the example of a really good a public good, maybe defence. If person A was to pay for defence, if there was no defence paid for by the government and person A paid for defence for the whole of the country, person B wouldn't need to pay for defence because they would benefit from the defence that person A was paying for. They would be able to free ride on their back. So therefore, the person who was paid for the defence and start would stop paying for it because they would just wait for another person to pay for defence for them to be able to benefit. The free rider problem. And non-rivalrous. Consumption of a public good, so this is what we're looking at now, non-rivalrous. Consumption of a public good by one person does not reduce the amount available of that good to others. Therefore, we can all consume the same amount of public good, even though the valuation of the benefit we derive may differ. In that, we can all receive the amount of the public good which we want. Somebody else having it doesn't reduce the amount of another person being able to have it. Okay, so this is an example of a public good. We normally use examples of defence. Okay, there are a number of things which are called quasi-public goods, and a quasi-public good is they have some characteristics of non-rivalrous and non-excludability, but they don't have both. It's difficult to actually characterise both of them. An example of a good which is a quasi-public good. A good example might be something like a national park like the Lake District, because it does have some elements of non-excludability to it, but it's not non-rivalrous, because obviously if lots of people were at the national park and lots of people were doing a particular activity, it would stop someone else by doing it, so therefore it's not non-rivalrous, but everybody can have it at the same time. You need to look through these notes to help you. You need to make sure you understand what a merit and a demerit good is, what a public good is, There's two characteristics: it's non-rivalrous and non-excludable. That it has the problem of it needs to be provided by the government due to the free rider problem, but you also need to know what a quasi-public good is. Quasi-public good.